This is the life. Up here in the cloud. My photos are up here somewhere. All my files, my whole digital life just sort of floating about, drifting around in the sky, soft, fluffy and completely safe. Hang on. The cloud isn't a real place though, is it? It's not actually a thing. Which means there's nothing up here. So what am I lying on?
See, that's the problem in a nutshell. We all talk about the cloud every single day. Your stuff's in the cloud. You say a bit to the cloud. And almost nobody could tell you what that actually means. I've spoken to a worryingly large number of people who did actually think that the cloud was a real place. So if the cloud doesn't exist, if my data isn't floating around in the sky somewhere, then where is it? And what the heck is the cloud? Welcome to Foxy's Lab. I'm Foxy, and in this series I explain complex smart home, IoT and home lab concepts in a way that makes sense. In this episode we're talking about the cloud, what it actually is, why we call it the cloud, why it feels like an infinite magical place, and the one question worth asking before you trust it with anything you actually care about. So go grab a coffee, I'll get one too, and then we'll get into it. There's an extremely short version of this video. I can give you it in a single line. You ready? The cloud is just somebody else's computer. That's it. That's the big secret. When something's in the cloud, it's sitting on a computer that you don't own, in a building that you'll never visit, that you are connecting to remotely. Your holiday photos aren't drifting about in the ether. They're on a hard drive in an industrial estate somewhere, probably a long way from where you are. If you want to dig deeper, then please keep watching, but seriously, that's kind of the bread and butter of it. There is no cloud. It's just thousands upon thousands of computers all over the world that we collectively decided we'd group together in our imaginations and give them a fluffy name. It's not a real place! Now those computers do have a name. We call them servers. And a server sounds like some exotic bit of kit, but it really isn't. It's just a normal computer. The difference is just the job it's doing. Your laptop is built to do many things for one person, you. A server is built to do one job really reliably for potentially thousands of people at once. That's the whole distinction. The word server describes the job the computer is doing, nothing more. You could easily turn your laptop into a server if you were so inclined. In fact, a lot of people do just that. Stack a load of those servers onto racks, fill a great big building with them, and you've got a data center. These places are not glamorous. They're enormous warehouses full of blinking machines and they run hot, extremely hot, because a server turns nearly all of the electricity you feed it straight into heat. So a huge chunk of a data center is just keeping the things cool enough so that they don't cook themselves in the process. The cloud, the actual physical cloud, is just loads of air-conditioned warehouses full of computers screaming into the void. When you spin up a server in the cloud, which is just a fancy way of saying start one up, you're usually not getting a whole computer. You're getting a slice of one. One physical machine gets carved up by software into loads of smaller pretend computers, and hundreds of customers can share the same lump of metal without ever seeing each other. It's called virtualization, and it's the magic trick that's at the heart of all of this. Because when you need, say, 10 more servers, nobody runs around the warehouse bolting in new boxes. The system just hands you 10 more slices out of a pool that from where you're sitting looks bottomless. You never see the edges. You never see the finite, physical, screaming hot reality of it. You just ask for more, and more appears.
Please, sir, I want some more.
This is why the cloud feels infinite, because on the scale of an individual person's use, or even an average business's use, it kind of is. So how do you get your head around renting a slice of a machine you can't even see? Well, think about electricity. You don't own a power station, I'd wager. You'd never dream of building one in the back garden just to run the kettle. You plug into the wall, and you take the electricity provided to you by your power company. You use what you need, and at the end of the month, you pay for exactly what you used. You don't think about the power station at all, it's just there on tap. That's exactly what the cloud is, computing on tap. You don't own the machine, you just rent the bits you need. You pay for what you use, and somebody else worries about the infrastructure. That utility company analogy wasn't a random one, by the way. I chose it on purpose. Because it turns out somebody predicted this whole thing decades before it even existed. Here's a quick history. So where does this come from? And more to the point, why on earth do we call it the cloud? The dream came first, and it came early. Back in around 1961, a computer scientist called John McCarthy stood up and predicted that one day, computing would be sold like a public utility, just as the telephone system is a public utility. He made that prediction in 1961, when a single computer was the size of a room and cost more than a house. It's Smart guy. McCarthy also coined the term artificial intelligence, so he was clearly having a good decade. If you're interested in the history of software engineering, by the way, I highly recommend you look John up, as he's made some seriously amazing contributions to the field. A couple of years later in 1963, a chap at the American Defense Research Law, J.C.R. Licklider, which is quite a name, started firing off memos about linking computers together into a shared network. And he addressed these memos, I kid you not, to the members and affiliates of the Intergalactic Computer Network. Brilliant. That vision turned into ARPANET, which then turned into the internet, which I'm going to take a stab in the dark here and assume that you've probably heard of.
Work the Google on the internet machine.
Okay, I love this little factory. Why do we call it the cloud? Because of a doodle. Engineers drawing diagrams of these networks kept running into the same problem. They'd be sketching out their bit, their computers, their connections, and then there was all this other stuff out there. The wider network that they didn't need to draw in detail. It wasn't their problem. So they needed a quick symbol that meant, and then it goes out there into the bit we're not going to worry about. And the squiggle they drew was a little cloud. That's it. That's the origin. It was never meant to be poetic. A cloud on a diagram meant don't worry about what's in there. A vague, fluffy placeholder for the stuff that somebody else deals with. I don't know about you, but I think that's adorable. I love nerds. And then we did the most human thing possible. We looked at the engineer's little, I guess don't worry about it, doodle, took it completely literally, and started imagining our actual data floating about in the sky. We took a shrug and turned it into a place. The actual phrase cloud computing turns up later. And the famous answer for when is actually wrong. Most people will tell you Google's boss said it in 2006. And he did say it then, but the earliest documented use traces back to a decade earlier in 1996 inside a computer company called Compaq, which incidentally made my first ever computer. One of the people in that room even jotted a lovely little note in his diary. Cloud computing, the cloud has no borders. They could see where it was going. The world just wasn't ready yet. The thing that finally made it real was Amazon. In 2006, Amazon Web Services let you rent storage by the gigabyte and rent computing power by the hour. By the hour. That's the bit that changed everything. Suddenly, a tiny startup could conjure 100 servers for one afternoon, do something enormous, and then just switch them all off and pay for just the afternoon. No warehouse. No upfront fortune. That elasticity is the modern cloud, and it's basically MacArthur's 1961 prediction finally coming true. Computing sold like electricity. He was just 45 years early. Today, as with most things, 3 huge companies run most of it. Amazon's lot are still the biggest, with roughly a third of the entire cloud. Microsoft's Azure is around a fifth, Google's about an eighth. Between them, that's getting on for 2/3 of everything that we call the cloud. Hold that thought, because it's going to matter later. The cloud comes with its own bag of words that people fling around to sound like they know what they're on about. So here's a cheat sheet. A couple of these you've already met today, but let's quickly revisit them so it stays fresh. You've already met the server. It's just a normal computer built to do one job really reliably for loads of people at once. Not all computers are servers, but all servers are computers. And basically any computer could be a server if you wanted it to be. It's literally called a server because it's a computer that serves something.
Oh, now I get it.
And you've met the data center. A data center is a building designed from the ground up around 3 jobs. It keeps thousands of machines powered, it keeps them cool, and it keeps them running no matter what. So you get row after row of rack servers with industrial cooling fighting the heat. There are backup generators ready for when the grid drops out, and enough physical security to make a bank jealous. The whole building exists so the computers inside it never stop. Okay, those ones you've already seen. Here's some new ones. A hyperscaler is what we call the companies running those data at a truly massive planet-spanning scale. The likes of Amazon, Microsoft and Google literally just means unimaginably big cloud company. Then there's on-prem, which is the opposite of the cloud. Short for on-premises. It just means running things on your own kit in your own home, under your own roof. Your own computer in your own house instead of a rented space in somebody else's warehouse. That distinction, where the computer physically sits, is the fork in the road that this whole channel lives on. I am a strong advocate of locally hosting services where it makes sense. I'm not anti-cloud, I'm just pro-local, but more on that later. Uptime is when a provider promises you, say, 99.9% uptime. That sounds basically perfect, but it's not. 99.9% still works out at nearly 9 hours of downtime a year. Add another 9 and you're down to about 50 minutes a year. Those extra decimal places is where all the money and the bragging live, but go back to our electricity company analogy. If I had 9 hours of power cuts every year, I'd be pretty bloody annoyed. Then there's latency, also known as lag. That's the delay while your request travels all the way to a distant data center and then all the way back. It's why a light control from the cloud can feel like it pauses to think, whilst the light controlled in your own home feels instant. The further the round trip, the more the lag. You'll hear this term a lot in the gaming world. Lag is the difference between winning a match and losing. A lot of the time, lag doesn't really matter all that much. Taking a few extra seconds to downloading a file from your Google Drive won't really bother you, but in a smart home, it can make a huge difference. A useful one to know for businesses is scaling. That's the word for coping with more demand without falling over, and it comes in two flavours. Vertical scaling means making one machine more powerful, like dropping a bigger engine into the same car. Horizontal scaling means adding more machines and sharing the work between them, like putting more cars onto the road. Closely related to scaling is elastic computing or elasticity. If scaling is the act of adding power, elasticity is the cloud doing it for you automatically in both directions. Depending on how busy you are, it scales up when you get a rush and then back down when it dies off. So you only ever pay for the bit you actually used. It stretches and shrinks to fit like elastic. You pay for what you use. Stretchiness is a huge part of why businesses fell in love with the cloud. Serverless is one of the most confusing words in the industry, and it's also a barefaced lie. There are obviously still servers involved. There's always a computer somewhere. Serverless just means that you, the person building the thing, never have to think about it. You hand your code to the cloud and it runs it wherever it's needed and silently looks after all the machinery for you behind the scenes. The servers don't vanish, they're still there, you just stop being the one that has to babysit them. This last one's actually a bit of a plot twist. Edge computing. The whole idea is a data center on the other side of the world is sometimes just too far away, so the computing is better off happening closer to you. And the closest it can possibly get is right on the device itself. Think of a smart camera that recognises a face without uploading a single thing. The work never leaves the gadget, so it's fast and it carries on working even if your internet drops, because it was never phoning anywhere in the first place. That's the point where edge computing actually overlaps with the local first stuff that I keep banging on about, because the work stays on your own kit. The catch is that the edge isn't one place, it's a sliding scale. At the most common end, it isn't on your device at all. It's still a full data center, it's just one that's been planted geographically closer to you rather than half a world away. So it's still somebody else's computer, only a much nearer one, and it still goes dark if your link to it drops. Most of what gets called edge computing is exactly that. Rented computing that's just been moved up the road. It's not a local first revolution, it's the cloud just admitting that distance has a cost. That's nowhere near all of the terms. Cloud computing is a broad church, and I could happily fill 3 more videos with the jargon alone, so I'm not going to cram every term in here. Quite a few of the big ones already have their own What the Heck episodes. I'll drop links to the most useful ones down below. Now, you'd be forgiven for thinking, due to the nature of this channel, that I'm about to tell you that the cloud is the enemy and you should run everything yourself. But I'm not, because I use the cloud. Loads. Every single day. The trick is working out where you draw your line. I've actually sat and thought about what I'm happy to hand over to somebody else's computer and what I'm absolutely not. And the line isn't cloud bad, local good. The line is that I decided where my stuff goes instead of it just happening to me. On the cloud is totally fine side, my notes live in Notion. My email and my documents are in Google Workspace. I use Claude for loads of bits and bobs and practically all of my coding these days. And of course, the entire reason you're watching this, YouTube Studio, which is about as cloud gets. None of that needs to live in my house. It's writing, storage and admin. If Notion has a wobble for an hour, I'll cope. That's a sensible thing to rent. Most people never clock this, but a lot of the cloud doesn't even get called the cloud. Take what I do for work. I host my websites on a platform called The Cell, and all of my code lives on GitHub. Most people don't really think of those as the cloud, they're just web hosting and version control systems, but that's only because they're older than the buzzword. I've been building websites since 1998, and back then nobody on earth was calling their web host cloud-based. Version control is older still. These things predate the fluffy name by decades, and yet they're exactly what we've been describing this whole time. My sites and my code, sitting on computers I don't own, in buildings I'll never see, reach through a wire. The Cell and GitHub are just the shiniest modern versions of stuff that's been running on somebody else's computer since long before anyone said the word cloud in relation to computing. So the cloud isn't new, we've been living with it for decades, it's just we've only recently named it. Then there's the other side of the line, something I will not put in somebody else's building, no matter how convenient it is. And that line's there for a reason. It's a freezing morning and you reach for your phone to nudge the heating up before you've even got out of bed. The app just sits there spinning. The boiler's fine, the radiator's fine, but the thermostat won't make a single decision without checking in with a server somewhere. And this morning, that server isn't answering. So you lie there, in your own house, waiting on a company to give you permission to turn your thermostat up. My notes can live in the cloud and I'll sleep just fine. The ability to turn the lights on in my own home stays right here with me. That's where I've drawn my line. And the only thing I would actually ask out of you is that you draw one too. You don't need to draw the line in the same place as mine, but you should draw one. Maybe you're not happy about your notes being in the cloud. Maybe you're perfectly fine with the cloud controlling your lights. But sit down for 30 seconds and decide which bits of your life you're happy to rent and which bits should stay under your own roof. Because the disasters almost come from the stuff that nobody really made a decision about. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Bit of free life advice there for you. Also make sure you eat all your peas so you grow up big and strong.
Thanks, Dad.
They say every cloud has a silver lining, but nobody ever warned you that every silver lining comes with a cloud. Which brings us neatly enough to where it can all go wrong. Welcome to the gotchas. Again, I need to reiterate that I'm not anti-cloud, I'm just pro-local, because none of this is the cloud being evil, and in many cases, cloud makes sense. These downsides are just what happens when something you depend on lives in a building you don't control. The first one is the obvious one. No internet, no cloud. If the thing that controls your gadgets is running through a data center before it does anything, then the moment your internet drops, or if their servers are having a bad day, your stuff just stops, which leaves you standing in a dark hallway jabbing at a light switch that doesn't have permission to turn your own lights on. The second one is nastier because here, the thing you bought stops working and it's not even your fault. The company's just switched it off. This has happened over and over again. Google bought a smart home company called Revolve back in 2016 and then shut the whole service down. The hardware was a roughly 300 quid hub. It was a perfectly good device, but it phoned home to a computer that no longer existed, so it stopped being anything at all. Another firm, Insteon, switched off their servers overnight in 2022 with no warning at all, whilst their own status page still cheerfully claimed everything was fine. And even non-smart home people may have heard about Spotify making a little gadget called the car thing, but then in May 2024, they told everyone who'd bought one that it would stop working and they should just chuck it in the bin. And we've all watched Nest and a few others pull similar moves over the years. The pattern is always the same. You didn't own the thing, you were renting a thing that only worked as long as the company you'd never met decided to keep the lights on. You are at their mercy, and they can pull the rug out from underneath you the moment it stops being worthwhile for them. And they will. The third one is the slower version of that. You buy something outright, no subscription, and then one day a subscription appears anyway. A company called Wink did this beautifully badly back in 2020. People had bought their hub, the box literally said no monthly fees, and then Wink gave everyone about a week's notice that it was now £5 a month. Pay up or the thing you're already on goes dark. Bit mean. The community had a rather stronger word for that, but this is a wholesome channel, so I'll just stick with mean. The fourth one is the big one, and it's the reason I told you to remember that 2/3 figure. You already forgot, didn't you? It's fine, I'll recap it in a minute. Single point of failure. Because so much of the entire internet rents from the same tiny handful of providers. Remember now, when one of those providers has a bad day, it's not just one website that falls over, it's half the web at once. In October 2025, one Amazon data center region had a fault, and it cascaded into about a 15-hour outage that racked up more than 17 million outage reports over 1,000 different services. Smart speakers, doorbells, games, banking apps, all failed because one building in Virginia was having a wobble. Literally just a few weeks later in November, Cloudflare pushed out one bad config file and knocked over a huge slice of the internet, including some of the biggest sites going. This wasn't a hack, it wasn't an attack, it was just one mistake in one company rippling out to everybody all over the world. That's what a single point of failure means. Not only are all of our eggs in one basket, that basket is being held by a very small number of companies who are just as prone to failure as everybody else. This last one I'll keep brief because I've got a whole separate video on it. Privacy. Your files and your footage are sitting on machines you don't control, under terms you didn't write and can't change. And sometimes local isn't even local. There's a camera company, Eufy, that sold cameras specifically promising your footage stayed on your own kit. No cloud. And then got caught quietly uploading thumbnails to the cloud anyway, and serving up streams that could be viewed with no password at all. So the lesson there isn't just trust local instead, it's that local first isn't a sticker on a box that you take on faith. It's something worth actually checking. A surprising number of people think that local first also means private. It might mean that in some circumstances, but any service with any access at all to the internet has the potential to harvest data from you. So you still need to decide whether or not you trust the company with your data. So that all sounds a bit grim, doesn't it? It isn't really, because nearly all of it comes down to one habit and a handful of sensible choices. So let me give you them. The single most useful question you can ask before you buy anything that connects to the internet is this: does this still work if the internet or the company goes away? If a gadget or service can't continue to do its main job without phoning home to a server, fine, maybe that's a trade you're happy to make, but make it on purpose with your eyes open. Then, prefer to keep local control over the stuff that you'd really hate to lose when the Wi-Fi drops. Your lights, your locks, your heating, your security, all of the things that you need to just work when you flick the switch regardless of what some data center is up to. And for the things that are going to depend on the company, have a plan for the day that that company packs it in. Because some of them will, many of them will, favour the gadgets that can fall back to working locally, or at least let you get your data out. But the cloud is not the villain. For some jobs, it's exactly the right answer, and you should use it gladly. So let me give you 3 jobs where I reach for it without a second thought. The first, and by a mile the strongest, is backup. This is the one I'll bang the drums for till the cows come home. There's an old rule called 3, 2, 1. 3 copies of anything you care about, and 2 different kinds of storage, with one of them off-site, somewhere that isn't your house. And the cloud is the easiest off-site copy in the world, because a fire, a flood, or a burglar can take out everything under your roof in one go, and a copy sitting in a data center 1,000 miles away just survives it. And I'm not talking theory here, the cloud has saved my bacon on more than one occasion. GitHub and Dropbox alone have prevented me from losing countless files over the years. For backup, Google Drive and Dropbox will do the job for most people. And there are more serious pro-grade tools like Backblaze if you ever want to go further. Whichever you pick, this is the one thing that cloud does better than anything you could build yourself. The second job is the stuff you simply cannot run yourself. Some things are just too big for a server on your shelf, and that's the plain truth of it. YouTube, compute-heavy operations, that really large AI models. Nobody's going to self-host YouTube in their spare room, and you're watching this video on the cloud right now. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. When the job is planet-sized, the cloud's the only sane way to do it.
That makes a lot of sense.
And the third is keeping things linked up. Same notes on your phone, your laptop, and your tablet, all in sync. A document 3 people can edit at once. Your stuff reachable from anywhere in the world, shared with anywhere that you choose. That's the cloud being properly good at something that's a real faff to do yourself. When the whole point is that it's in one shared place everyone can reach, the cloud earns its keep. So that's the balance. Backup, the too big to self-host stuff, and keeping things in sync. Reach for the cloud there and don't feel a shred of guilt about it. Everywhere else, just ask the question, does it still work if the internet or the company goes away? And if it doesn't, is that okay? So that's the cloud. It's not floating, it's not fluffy. And despite my best efforts, it's not a lovely place to have a lie down. Despite how comfy it looks, it's somebody else's computer. In a freezing cold, noisy warehouse, reachable through a wire. The name's a 40-year-old shrug that we all just took far too literally. And once you can see it for what it actually is, you stop being at its mercy. You can use it on purpose for the jobs that it's properly good at and keep the things that matter to you under your own roof. Learning there's no cloud might bring you down to earth with a bump, but that's the whole point. With your head out of the clouds, you can see clearly. And from down here, you're the one who decides what floats off to somebody else's computer and what stays right here, at home, with you. What the Heck is an ongoing series where I explain the ins and outs of tech. I try to post a new video every week, so if you want to be notified when the next episode drops, hit the bell and YouTube will make sure you're kept in the loop. If you want to know more about the importance of local control, I have a whole playlist about it. I'll put the link somewhere around here. Okay, I need to go find something else fluffy to lie down on. Tra!